So if you want, I have a subject called the Gita. I can take that subject up if you want. That and tomorrow we will begin with collective life. Beginning of collective life and sharing those, vision about life in general, particular reference to collective life means ideal of human unity and human cycle. Some conceptions which are basic in those two books we will take up. Today evening we can talk about the Gita if you want. If you want a general talk on question and answer or general topic which is in our schedule, we can have a general talk. Well, I think I should like to go by what you like. Gita is ready with me, so I have not to bother about Gita very much. We can begin with the Gita. It's quite easy and simple in one sense. See, you must have a certain general idea of the setting of the Gita. See, Gita happens to be incorporated in the great epic Mahabharata. You see, the story of Indian epic story. Two epics are there, Mahabharata and Ramayana. Gita happens to be an episode in the great epic. It is not a separate composition, though it may be, perhaps it was created separately, written separately, and then put into the Gita. One doesn't know. Historically, these things are not clear in Indian cultural history. They are very lax about historical sense, and so it is not sure whether Gita was originally a part of the epic or in the epic that was current. Gita was put in afterward by somebody who thought that was the best place to put Gita in, you see. But Gita happens now to be a part of the Mahabharata, but it has acquired such an independent importance that many people in India have forgotten it, that it belongs to the Mahabharata or it's a part of the Mahabharata. It has become an independent book of reference. It is a scripture, so to say. It is a very holy book in the sense that people refer to it almost in the same way as they would refer to any ancient text, Veda or Upanishad, you see. And it has acquired that place by its prominence in the life and by the studies that have been given to it during hundreds of years. And it has a vast literature about it. Gita is written over, I think, by people in India, outside, and so on. All kinds of people have written many things about the Gita. Now, this is a third synthesis of Indian culture, this Gita. First synthesis of Indian culture is the Veda, you see, where you find the cultural soul of India expressing itself first time in an integral and organic synthetic way, putting all the hymns of the pre-Vedic period into the form of the Vedas. The Vedas, the historicity of the Vedas is not known. They are the first book. That is true. First book of humanity or mankind is the Veda. That is the first book. Before that, there is no other book that was written, you see. And in the organization of this book, it appears that perhaps there were many hymns current before, and it is at the time of Veda that they seem to have put these 10,500 or 10,546 hymns together. They have put it together, you see, dividing it into 10 parts and so on. But that is Vedic study. Now, that is the first synthesis of Indian spirit in which the experience of the early seers of the Indian culture is embodied in a symbolic language. After 1000 or 1500 years comes another time when the Upanishads were organized and found expression as the highest cultural expression of the Indian spirit. Upanishads follow the Vedic times, but they are written about 1000 or 1200 to 1500 years after the Veda. Therefore, the language undergoes a change, but the subject matter remains the same, the search for the truth and the method of attaining the truth. That is the main subject of both these, you see. How to attain the highest truth and the goal of life being immortality or attainment of truth, how to rise to it. That is the problem, both in the Veda as well as in the Upanishads. Upanishads speak in a language which is more easily understandable because it is nearer the classical language of Sanskrit. Gita, after about 1000 years again, after 1000 or perhaps 1200 years after the Upanishad, gives you another synthesis of Indian spirit. In between means from the Upanishadic time to the Gita time, much had taken place. A far great advance has taken place in the field of yoga, philosophy, and so on, search for the truth. And Gita again puts the whole thing together in a kind of synthesis, whether consciously or unconsciously. But Gita is the third synthesis of Indian spirit. After that, if you go about 1,000 years afterwards, you find the epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, in which the Gita is placed. You see, the epics are the first, and the Puranas means the mythologies follow afterwards. The Puranas, the epics are contemporaneous almost with the Gita or a little later, and the mythological writings come very near this 15th, 14th, 13th century. So they're very near the modern times. You see. Now these four periods represent the big efforts of Indian spirit to make a synthesis and make it popular among the people. In the age of the mythology, the whole message of the Indian culture went to the masses. Gita represents the third period of Indian synthesis. That's what I want to tell you this evening. That is the third period. That's one. And Buddhistic period after the Gita, of course, either it was contemporaneous or just after the Gita, Buddhas. And you see the period that gives rise to Jainism and Buddhism. These two also, occur just at the time of the Gita simultaneously or little after. Now, Gita represents a synthesis of, you see, by the time that Gita was written, Sankhya was already there, Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya in which Purusha and Prakriti, the subjective self and the objective nature, the active nature, that is a main philosophical doctrine. And then it explains all the material elements by enumerating earth and water and fire and sky and you see electricity and so on. Like that it explains the material world and explains the connection of a subjective consciousness with this material world by positing two elements which are permanent, Purusha and Prakriti. The two are eternal and separate, according to Sankhya. It is Vedanta that came and brought them together. You see, Sankhya had a dichotomy, two eternal elements permanently separate from one another, the Purusha consciousness, the watching self, and the Prakriti. And in the Prakriti, intellect, emotion, will, nervous system, physical system, earth, water, sky, ether, fire, all in one. That is inconscient nature. Right up to intellect, it is all inconscient. Only the cognizing consciousness gives it the light of consciousness. That is how the Sankhyas look upon the world. Sankhya was one system that was current at the time of the Gita. Then there was this system of Raja Yoga, system of Jnana Yoga, system of Bhakti Yoga, system of Karma Yoga. So Gita takes up these and puts them into a synthesis, you see. Gita takes up all the intermediate strands that happened between Upanishadic time and the Gita times and then puts them together into a kind of integration or a synthetic, representation of cultural strand, making up a metaphysical whole. That is what Gita achieves, you see. And that is why perhaps it is satisfying to most people even up to now, because it is not one-sided or it is not as if sectarian in its outlook. It is not, weighed down by partiality for one against the other or something like that. It's very Catholic in spirit and very, very wide. And in the way in which it looks at metaphysical or yogic or philosophical problems, it is always ready to accommodate and give each thing its proper place. Now, Gita gives you, for the first time, many things which, you see, were not so well developed and prominently brought forward by the Upanishads. The Upanishad brought forward certain aspects which were not clearly brought forward by the Veda. The Veda spoke a language which was completely different from the language of the Upanishads. And it was symbols. And Sanskrit was also a language not yet fully formed at the time of the Veda. Therefore, the grammar is different. In the Upanishad, the grammar is definite and the terminology becomes different. In Gita's time, again, you find certain new ideas which Upanishads have perhaps thought of or spoken of lightly like a suggestion or hinted at it. But in the Gita, it finds a prominent place, and then you find that Gita has added something to the cultural growth of the ideal of Indian spirituality. But more than its metaphysics, which we'll come to, first and most attractive part of the Gita is that it is not a book of philosophy pure. These are its secondary advantages, which you get a synthesis and all that. Metaphysical truths which were not in the Upanishads are brought forward. But Gita's greatest advantage is that it's not a philosophical book. It is not as if somebody was sitting down and asking, what is the soul, who created the world, how the world was made, what is the relation between man and world, or God and world and man, and so on. No. It's a book which addresses itself to a life situation. Arjuna is on the battlefield. The situation in which Gita opens is that Arjuna, one of the commanders of the Pandava army, is on the battlefield of Kurukshetra where they are going to fight. The fight was with regard to division of the empire. Do you know this story? Most of you must know it perhaps. You see, there were two cousins. You see, two groups of cousins rather. And they disagreed about the partition of the empire. So one part, the sons of Dhritarashtra, the Kauravas, claimed that they had a greater right. And so they first gave a portion to the Pandavas and then called the Pandavas to gambling, you see. And in the gambling, the Pandavas lost whatever portion they got as their share. And then the condition was that if they lose the game, they will go out in the forest for 12 years. And 13th year, they must remain incognito. 12 years in forest and 13th year, they must not be found. They must be completely underground, so to say. If they are discovered, then again 12 years more, they will have to go. And then after 12 years, their portion will be restored to them. You see, if they are not found. This was the understanding. I mean, roughly the idea was like that. That is the setting in the Mahabharata, you see. Now, Gita starts with the situation where the two armies are on the battlefield. The whole thing has finished. The 12 years have passed. 13th year they were hiding and they were not detected. Kaurava said, we have detected you. Pandava said, you have not detected us. And there was a quarrel on that point. And so they refused to give any portion. The Kauravas refused to give anything. He said, no, they can't be given because you have been found out. This was the point of contention. That is the original story in the epic. Now, Gita starts on the point where the two armies are, therefore, Krishna went and tried to persuade the two parties to come to terms, to tell the Kauravas to give something to the people. After all, he said they are your cousins. And the father was the emperor, your father was the blind man, and their father was actually in charge of the kingdom. So you must give them something. But they didn't yield. So there was decision of fight. And Gita opens on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Gita is not written really in a room. Gita is spoken on the battlefield. That is the context. You see, the writer of the Gita doesn't say, I write the Gita. He says, you see, here are two armies standing together, standing against one another. And here is Arjuna asking Krishna the question, who are those people who are standing? And then, of course, somebody describes, Krishna describes. And then Arjuna at once is faced with a psychological crisis. So Gita addresses itself to a life situation. Gita is not written for philosophy. It is written when one finds it difficult to solve a problem in life. You see, the problem was to Arjuna whether it is good to kill his own cousins for the share of a kingdom. Even though they were right, their fight was righteous in the sense that their cause was just. Now, for a just cause, till now he had fought hundreds of battles. There was no question in his mind about fighting. When he was fighting on the side of the right, well, he never thought that he was always on the side of the divine. And therefore, he was performing the duty of a warrior. You see, Kshatriya, as they say, the fighter. His duty is to fight for the right cause, protect the old, women, and children, and fight against any injustice that is done anywhere. That is a duty. And that he must do impersonally. Well, he was doing it. So, till now, it is not that he was fighting for the first time. But the first psychological crisis came to him for the first time when he saw that now he has to kill his own cousins. If he is to take his kingdom, he must kill his own cousins. So there is a crisis in the psychological state of Arjuna, whether it is correct for a fighter, even though his cause be just, to kill his own cousins, to destroy his own family. Well, that is the problem, you see. That is the Gita's background. And therefore Gita is very much relevant to the modern mind also, because the modern mind is practical and wants to apply highest truth to life, is it not? Well, Gita eminently supplies that need. It shows how to come to a decision when two values are at variance, or when there is a conflict between two values that you have been thinking of as equal. Well, how to come to the decision? You see, that is Gita's one great advantage. Now, the second point about Gita is that Gita is one of the three books that have been regarded as very prominent in the Indian cultural history. That is to say, a man is called an acharya, means a great, like Pope, pontific. He is great spiritual leader if he can consistently explain the Brahma Sutra, the Upanishad, and the Gita. The three must be consistently explained for somebody to be called the leader of religious movement or a great religious, leader. Just as you take, if you take the Old and the New Testament, suppose, and somebody is able to give a consistent explanation, then he will be considered very high in religious circle. Supposing that was the idea, well, the similar is the position of Brahma Sutra, Upanishad, and the Gita in Indian culture. You see, therefore, all eminent, philosophers have written on the Gita, on the Upanishad, and on the Brahma Sutra. They will always attempt to write because consistently apply their philosophy to that, you see. Well, Gita, being one of the three, has been also well studied and has occupied a very high place in the religious, estimation of Indian people. Now, in some respects, Gita is a synthesis, as I told you, but in another respect, it is a great progress forward, and in some respects, it's a great revolutionary movement. Gita is a revolution also. Gita is a progress on what the Upanishad had done. And it is revolutionary about so many ideas that must have been current at the time when Gita was written. So that way Gita is attractive to the modern mind in many ways. First, being practical. Secondly, being a synthesis and a wider outlook and tolerant way of arranging things and values. And third is pulling the thread of cultural life of India to a greater extent. I mean, taking it more progressively forward beyond the Upanishadic range. And thirdly, that it has many revolutionary ideas in it. You see, it is not merely confirmation of true tradition. Gita is very untraditional, though people have tried to make it into tradition. Even if you oldest man you find, most orthodox man in Benares or Haridwar will swear by the Gita, and he might be breaking the teaching of the Gita every step, you see. But Gita has acquired that place. Gita is very revolutionary in its some of its conceptions. Well, we will try to see some of these conceptions. What are the new metaphysical positions of the Gita? So let me take up the development as I made at one point, I think. Detail will go a little after, perhaps. I really don't know what it is. Yeah. I remember a tribute paid by one of the vice chancellors of in Andhra University to Sri Aurobindo. I began with that in Banaras University when I gave the lecture on the Gita. It was Mr. C. R. Reddy, the Vice Chancellor of Andhra University, uh, in the 30s of the last this century. You see, in all humility of devotion, I hail Sri Aurobindo as the sole sufficient genius of the age. He is more than hero of the nation. He is among the saviors of humanity who belong to all ages, all nations, the Sanatanas or the eternals who live in our existence with their eternal presence, whether we are aware of it or not. He came to Pondicherry this year already and was very much impressed. And I think it is Andhra University that for the first time gave a merit prize to Sri Aurobindo for original contribution to world thought. After that, they stopped that prize because they thought that nobody would be able to deserve that prize which was once given to Sri Aurobindo. So after that, they discontinued the prize. It was given another name and was turned over to a different subject matter, you see. Well, this I said this, it was because it was 4th of December at the time when I spoke at Benares. And also I refer to it now in one sense because he has written a great commentary, essays on the Gita, you see, which is directly does not deal with the text, but which interprets the text, almost entitling him to become an acharya of Indian, religious life, because he has written on the Veda, he has written on the Upanishad, and he has written on the Gita. So the three main books of Indian scriptures, three Indian scriptures having been commented upon by him consistently, well, he also is entitled to be an acharya in the old classical sense of the term, though he didn't care to be an acharya, as I said. And I don't think the Orthodox people would accept it either. The Gita differs from all the scriptures of the world in that it is not a book of philosophy, just as I told you now, setting forth an explanation of the cosmos. Neither it is a book of revealed religion. Somebody saying that I give you the knowledge of God. Come on. It's not written in that way. Yes. Yes. It's a book that addresses itself to a life situation. Yes, that's what they say almost, isn't it? Yes. It's not written in the cell of the philosopher or in the forest groves to answer the why and wherefore of the world and life. It answers the question, how to act in life in a critical situation created by conflicting values. In this regard, the Gita agrees perfectly with Sri Aurobindo's vision of the reality, that Sri Aurobindo's vision of the reality also connects the divine with life. And Gita addresses the whole question to relevancy of life and highest values of life. In fact, Gita brings in the question whether God has anything to do with life and action. And then there is a very large ground of agreement between Sri Aurobindo and the Gita's position. 90% almost, or 99%, you see. And yes, for he insists that life, as Sri Aurobindo also insists, and therefore all action should be molded by the divine dwelling in the heart of man. He wants human life to become life divine. Gita tells us that the value of action depends not upon its outer form, but on psychological basis from which it proceeds. This is one great fundamental idea of the Gita. It points to a practical path to reach the basis, the true source of all action. In this respect, Gita is a value-centric book. It shows that normally man acts under the pressure of desires, emotions, greed, ambition, in short, on the basis of his ego. And this is not the right basis. That's what Gita points out. This is not the right basis. It is, or it should be, accepted as only a temporary basis. The one on which one is acting now is not a permanent and fixed law of nature, but a basis which you have to temporarily accept, which serves some preliminary purpose of growth of man towards the light. You cannot often begin with the higher consciousness and act from there. So you admit and accept the basis of ego as a temporary measure for a purpose of growth towards the light. The right basis of action, the Gita says, is not even social morality or ethical idealism. The true source of action is the divine will in the individual, discoverable by him. That is the true source. Gita teaches that life and action are not to be renounced, but their ignorant and egoistic basis has to be rejected. And it has to be changed into the true basis, not only rejection, but a changing of the basis of action altogether, you see. It declares that the divine will is actively at work and can and does intervene in the critical life situation in the case of an individual and also in the case of the collectivity. When the individual gives up his egoistic initiation of action, then an impersonal and even a divine will can be discovered and obeyed. This great truth is crucial because it has a direct bearing on the goal of life, the highest fulfillment of man on earth. The difficulty is that of discovering the divine will. For men have so many ideas, ideals, values in life by which men seek to govern partially through his conduct, partially though by which they want to govern their conduct. Gita is Catholic in its scope and accepts all lesser ideals and values as preliminary preparatory stages, as steps on the way to the discovery of the divine will. But it insists again and again upon necessity of making the discovery. You must not simply rest satisfied with what you are doing, but insist on making the discovery of an impersonal, cosmic and divine will. Though in a certain sense everything happens by the sanction of the divine will, still there is for man the personal, even collective aspect of the divine will, discoverable. And this is the problem set before Arjuna in the Gita. One may equate the divine will to a principle, to an idea, to an ideal, to a value, which one follows, but over and above and independent of all such intermediate permissible standards, there is a divine will which is to be discovered. A divine purpose is at work in the universe, in the individual's life, and in that of the collectivity. This is the basis of the Gita. You see, this is on which then Gita is founded. We will come to some portion of the Gita, but this is taking out how they look at the Gita from which point of view and how to judge the teachings of the Gita. Because if you otherwise get into the detail of the interpretation, then the background will be not very clear. You see. Gita points out psychological processes and methods by which one can gradually progress towards the discovery of the divine will. It can be arranged in a form of a graded rise with methodical steps. One has to begin by doing action without desire for the result, with an attitude of equality, samatha, in which neither good nor adverse result affects the inner balance and the fundamental attitude of detachment. In fact, the establishment of samatha or equality in the consciousness under all conditions is a sign that one has succeeded in giving up the desire or attachment for the fruit of his actions. That is a sign. Gita suggests a further step. On the basis of Sankhya realization, it speaks of the two parts of the human consciousness. This we have dealt with in our yoga lectures, you see, when we made the exposition between Purusha and Prakriti differentiation, you see. Gita puts these two parts of the human consciousness, a realizable dichotomy of the inner being of man. There is in each individual a part that can separate itself from the nature aspect, the active part, the part that changes from the mind and all its ideas, suggestions and movements, from his emotions, feelings and their actions and reactions, from his desires, impulses and passions of the vital, and from the body. And this part can remain unaffected by all the activities of this nature. It is a Purusha as a Sakshi, the witness consciousness. Gita says that by practicing this separation of Purusha and Prakriti, this separate self and the moving nature, man would be able to control his nature more effectively, and it would serve as the initial step in the process of transformation of nature. This is the one practical remedy it suggests, side by side with the advice to give up all desire for the result of one's action. People very often question how can one act when he has given up all desire for the result of his action. Gita suggests a step that if one wants to practice desireless action, action should be done as a sacrifice to the divine, as an offering to the divine, not for any result or not for any fruit of the action, but as an offering to the divine, as a sacrifice. You see? Well, Gita points out the distinction between Tyaga and Sannyas for the first time. Renunciation, you see, external and true renunciation. It says that if you put on a ochre color garb and go about like sannyasi, it's not true renunciation. Gita that way is very revolutionary, very unorthodox, you see. Gita doesn't say that if you put on a sannyasi's garb, you are a man who has renounced. Because renunciation is inner according to Gita. External and true renunciation. There was an excessive otherworldly stress in the spiritual ideals of Gita for centuries, though renunciation of life as an indispensable condition for spiritual realization was not accepted by the Vedic sages, nor was it accepted by the Upanishads. The conception of the divine in the Gita is not that of a static being. The conception of divine in the Gita is dynamic. Active aspect of the divine also is accepted and given a greater prominence than any book in India. Gita may be said to be unique in emphasizing this aspect and related to life. Not only God is active, but it is actively related to life. This omnipresent reality, the divine, has a purpose, a divine purpose, and life is meant to be the field for the working out of that purpose. And even the battlefield of Kurukshetra is not exempted from it. That is what Gita's teaching comes to. That divine purpose can extend its, its field of operation not merely to normal, innocent activities, but to critical and cruel activities like the battlefield, fighting. Even there, the purpose of the divine can be, can find its field. Yes. Even the battlefield of Kurukshetra is not exempted from it. By implication and even by open declaration, Gita says that life is not altogether governed by the ego, either individual ego or collective ego. Sri Aurobindo suggests that Kurukshetra can be taken to be a symbol of the battle of life. As Arjuna was on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but every soul can consider his life as the battlefield, as Kurukshetra. And Kurukshetra can become symbolic because in his life also there will be always such conflicts between ideals, values, between duties, various kinds of duties, whether it is good to, submit to what is required by outer standards or whether one has to follow some inner light. In the inner light, there is conflict between mind and vital being, which to follow, and so on. There will always be conflict in life. So he says it is perhaps good to take the Kurukshetra as a symbol, and yes. In fact, he suggests Kurukshetra can be taken as a symbol of the battle of life in which forces of light and forces of darkness are constantly clashing. As regards the dilemma of Arjuna, Sri Krishna assures him that the divine will shall be fulfilled as far as the battle of Kurukshetra is concerned, even if Arjuna would not participate in it as an instrument. This is a very strong position of the Gita and one very rarely taken up by any other book in scriptures. See, Arjuna refuses to be convinced of the necessity of fighting. Arjuna is struck by remorse and he thinks that he would be committing a great sin if he killed his own cousins and so on. So after a good deal of argumentation, he does not submit to Krishna's persuasion. So Krishna says, all right, even if you don't fight, I am going to carry out my purpose in the battle of Kurukshetra. I would like very much that you should be my instrument in carrying out my will through. But even if you don't, well, what I have intended will have to happen. So far is the stress on the, 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 the divine will carrying its own, in difficult situation in individual and collective life. Uh, Divine will be fulfilled as far as the battle of Kurukshetra is concerned, even if Arjuna would not participate in it as the instrument. He says to Arjuna, in fact, Kurukshetra is not your battle only. The words he uses are that it is not only your interests are at stake, but my purpose also is at stake. Though each participant has joined this battlefield for his own purpose on his own calculation. Each warrior that came or leader that came there to participate, well, on his own calculation, either because somebody's brother was there, somebody's maternal was there, somebody's influence was there, some leader was there, and he had to submit to the pressure and came on his own calculation. But Sri Krishna says that each one fighting here has his own, and I have my own purpose, which overrides all the purposes of the individuals that are fighting here. It is mine, and I have a purpose to carry out, and it would be carried out at any cost. We might note that the Gita teaches that collective life has also a divine purpose to fulfill. The world we live in wears the appearance of an inert, inconscient creation, and human life is full of the play of ignorant forces and which are undivine. Many religious and philosophical systems have given great prominence, including Buddhism, for instance, to this aspect. To Gita, the world is not altogether undivine. It devotes 4 chapters to the Vibhuti Yoga to show how the world is magnificent, beautiful, and divine. This is Gita's wonderful contribution, you see. In the previous synthesis in the Isha Upanishad, the Upanishad begins with this declaration, Isha Vasya Vidam Sarvam. We repeated that on the first day when we opened the session, you see. All this is for habitation by the Lord. These 4 chapters of the Gita are practically a commentary on this. All this is for habitation by the Lord. How? And Gita's 4 chapters, beginning with the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, I think, you see, they are a sort of an application of this view that life is divine. Now, all along we are told in many philosophical systems that life is anything but divine. It is undivine and sinful and conflict and struggle and unworthy and so on. Gita is the first book in that respect, a scripture. When Arjuna says, well, how can I know? You say that you lived here before, you practiced yoga before, and that you know all your past births and so on. You know my birth also. How to know that you are here and that how to know that God is here? Oh, he said, that I will tell you. And then he begins these 4 chapters, and in which he says, look, you want to see me? All right, I'll show you. And then he says, look at the Himalayas if you want to see me in matter. Look at the Ganges if you want to see me as a river. Look at the banyan tree if you want to see me as a tree. Like that, there is a list given, you see, showing that world is not all undivine. There are, aspects of the divine in each plane of consciousness, manifesting a magnificence and a greatness and a sort of well, you can call it in one sense, sublimity of the divine is present on each plane, and you can feel it. So he says, don't try to look at the world as if it was all undivine and made up only of ignorant and horrible things and so on. You look at it, I am also present there. In Vibhuti is a particular manifestation of the divine. Vibhuti is not incarnation. Vibhuti is not avatar. You see, the Gita, Indian culture makes distinction between the partial aspects of the divine manifested in one quality or one power and a incarnation coming with directly with the divine consciousness. For instance, if you take a quality of mercy or quality of non-violence, now that quality, if it is raised to a divine level and brought down into life, then the man who embodies it will be a vibhuti of ahimsa, vibhuti of non-violence, you see. Vibhuti is the embodiment in human life of a prominent trait or power of the divine, a property or quality of the divine, more than human in its dimensions when it is manifested. Well, it is a vibhuti, you see. Normally, a man may be generous, but if a man can be generous to the extent where you feel this is superhuman generosity, then that would be vibhuti of generosity. You see, vibhuti of what you call the generousness. So, man might be non-violent ordinarily, but when he expresses or brings into his life an extraordinary degree of non-violence, like Gandhi, then you say he is a vibhuti of the ahimsa, vibhuti of non-violence. It's divine aspect of non-violence. You see? The quality, when it is human and extraordinary, you say it is a great human attribute. But when it passes over the limit of ordinary humanity, then it becomes a divine quality. You see, quality of the divine. So that when a man manifests that, he is called vibhuti. And when he manifests that supreme consciousness of the divine himself, then he is called avatar, the descent, the incarnation. Incarnation is conscious of his divinity. The vibhuti is conscious of the quality, power, aspect of the divinity which he manifests. You see? Well, there, Krishna points out in 4 chapters the aspect of the world in which the divine can be seen in his magnificence in matter, in life, in vegetable kingdom, in animal kingdom, in all aspects of human life. Insisting that you must not look only on one side, you see, and always think that the world is unconscious, inert, made of matter, without consciousness, absence of divine, and so on. Says that I am present. Now, this aspect is not brought out in the Upanishads, for instance. The avatarvad, the incarnation aspect, is not in the Upanishads. It doesn't find a place in the Upanishads. So many elements like that the Gita brings forward. Yes, where is it? Yes. Even matter which is regarded as inert and can, and it points out, can be sublime. The Himalayas are the divine in matter. In fact, these 4 chapters of the Gita may be regarded as a detailed exegesis of the opening verse of each Upanishad, Isha Vasyamidam Saram Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat. All this is for habitation by the Lord.
I don't understand you.
Well, that is Sanskrit. Whatever is moving in the universal movement. Sri Krishna points out in effect that the divine is not absent from the world, that he is here flowing in the rivers and in the vegetable kingdom also. Gita makes us feel the divine presence in the world, for the world is not merely what our senses represented to be, the divine is there even though unperceived by man. One of the basic ideas of the Vedanta derived from the Sankhya system is that Purusha, the self, is eternally free, and Prakriti, the nature, is condemned to remain bound. This is a Vedantic position which even Shankar has accepted, you see. It is eternally ignorant and imperfect and will always remain so. Nature will be what it is. As I told you, Vivekananda's pulling the dog's tail, and if you leave it, it will again, you see, go back to the original position. Now, Gita points out that as Purusha is eternally free, so Prakriti also can be claimant to freedom. Gita, for the first time, puts it categorically and clearly that if the subjective aspect is free, the nature also can be free. Before Gita, the philosophers and the religious leaders did not grant freedom to nature. They said naturally bound, will be always ignorant. Purusha can be free, subjective self, but that in which he will manifest or express himself will be always imperfect. Well, only freedom, but even perfection. This can be seen by studying the implications of some of the aspects of the Gita. Even though the essential divinity is the same in the saint and in the sinner, now fundamental divinity is not changed because a man is sinner, the divine in him does not become a sinner. You see, in a sinner, the divine is present as divine. Divine is not sinner. The fundamentally, though the divinity is the same as in the saint and the sinner, still the saint has to be protected and saved, says the Gita. You see, Paritranaya sadhuna vinasha cha duskrutam. That is the verse of the Gita. That I take birth in order to, punish the wicked or destroy the evildoers and protect the sadhus, protect the saints, or people with goodwill and people who embody higher values of life. I have to take birth in order to protect them and also to destroy those who are evildoers. Now, there, you see, Gita admits unity of soul and yet admits a distinction in nature part because a man is a saint or a sinner not in his essential self but in his nature. A man becomes a sinner not in his inner self, which is divine in all, even in the sinner. In spite of him, the divinity is there. And still, Gita says that the saint has to be protected and the sinner has to be punished. Now, you see that there the distinction is pointed out, and this distinction is in nature part. The Mahatma or the great soul, the Sreshta, the leader, and the ordinary man, the distinction is due to that which expresses itself in their nature. Essentially, they are all divine. And yet one is put here, another is put here, third is put here. Because how much of the divinity comes out in their nature? You understand? So the distinction is made by what expresses itself in the nature part. Next, the Gita speaks of the Vibhuti, the special becoming of the divine. The Vibhuti embodies not merely the nature of a sadhu or a Mahatma or a great soul, not a heightened human perfection, but some quality, some aspect of the divine and his power. That may be regarded as a second step in the nature's ascent to freedom and perfection. In the Vibhuti, nature rises to a far greater height than even the highest attainment reached by man. For example, the non-violence practiced by Mahatma Gandhi far surpasses the ordinary practice of it by many people. And in that sense, he may be called the Vibhuti of non-violence. You see, the divine aspect of non-violence manifested in man. In the avatar, the incarnation, the nature attains the highest perfection. The avatar, the incarnation aspect, is an important part of Indian conception of the divine. And it has been brought into prominence by the Gita. In the Upanishad, the avatar word doesn't find a place. The avatar is not mentioned in the Upanishads. Which points out the evolutionary significance of the avatar. The avatar is not a miracle that comes out to overawe man or to dazzle mankind's consciousness. Avatar comes to fulfill evolutionary need. He comes to show man how to evolve to a divine consciousness with the human nature, you see. It can be, the divine is not some absentee landlord away from life, or it can take up the human nature and the human form. Some religions like Christianity accept one and only one incarnation of the divine. They practically limit the omnipotence of the one into one single act. But the Hindu view of omnipotence of God cannot, according to Hindu view, it cannot be limited to one incarnation, and therefore the Hindu admits many incarnations, including Christ. The Sri Krishna says that I have accepted human birth and action, and one who knows my birth and my action as divine really knows me. Not myself as the divine, not my soul as the divine, but my birth and my action also is the divine. Janma karma chame divyam. That is a word in the Gita, you see. My birth and my action. which happen in nature, you see. Not one who accepts my consciousness as a divine. No, my birth and my action, when you accept that as a divine, then you know me thoroughly. That I am not a human consciousness, but a divine that has taken birth and divine that is acting. Gita points out that the divine action by the human being is possible, that a human being can act divinely. It is possible by a gradual development of human consciousness, and this is made clear in the Vibhuti Yoga chapters by Sri Krishna declaring, I am Arjuna among Pandavas. Pandavanam Arjunoham. See, when he says, I am Himalaya among the mountains and Ganges among the rivers, then suddenly in one verse he comes and says, I am I am Arjuna among the Pandavas, and he is addressing Arjuna. He is speaking to Arjuna, you see, and he says, I am Arjun among the Pandavas, means yourself. So you can see how the existence of the divine may be unknown to the individual and the divine may be conscious of his divinity in him. Arjun must have been very much surprised to be told that he is the incarnation or vibhuti of the divine among the Pandavas. If I had to become anybody among the Pandavas, I will become only Arjuna. And I am Arjuna. He states that I am Arjuna among Pandavas, and he is addressing Arjuna, personally directly speaking to him. Now, Krishna declaring Pandavanam Arjuna, I am Arjuna among the Pandavas, and Arjuna would be carrying the divine will and therefore doing the divine action if he participated in the battle. To act in life from the divine poise, therefore, is possible from the Gita's point of view. And even a 5-year plan or a Tibetan situation or some disturbing incident can seek guidance from it. It's not merely that you can take guidance in religious life. Sri Aurobindo's last chapter in the Essays on the Gita is not merely a brilliant summary, but one of the most inspired chapters in the world's philosophical and religious literature. That is for this evening.
So getting back to the beginning of the elements of this here, the two people, or two tribes, two groups, are separated. The Gita came through which unit? No, neither?
No, Gita was subsequently written. Gita must have been written perhaps 1000 or 1500 years after.
After that.
Gita is not participated, it's put in that like a poet. Supposing, you see, just as Milton puts it in the Revolt of Satan. Now, Milton was not a participant anywhere, he was only a Protestant. But, but he puts his poem in a situation where you have to go to the beginning of the world, is it not?
Now, what did this come from? What group of people did this come from, this writing?
This writing is a result of historical they have tried, but there is no certain data found. It was a Bhagavad religion, a religion that was current, of which Gita, they say, was an expression.
Was an expression.
Yes, but this is a thesis, you see, it's not a certainty. Gita must have been, according to them, a result of the Bhagavad sect, which was current in western part of India and central India. Well, that is a conclusion, but this is a hypothesis. It's for good
there
for.
Must have been a reason for it. So.
Well, maybe that the man who saw so many things current thought of putting it together or practiced the yoga which gave him the synthetic idea, because he practiced the yoga in which devotion, karma and knowledge are all integrated completely, you see. So that it's not an exclusive yoga which the Gita preaches. Gita preaches a synthetic yoga of knowledge, action and devotion simultaneously. First 6 chapters are devoted to one aspect, 6 to 12 are devoted to second aspect, 12 to 18 are devoted to third aspect, like that, you see.
And we don't know actually if it was a basic individual idea or a collective.
No, that is, you see, historicity is very doubtful. That is the difficulty with Indian literature and culture in general. The sense of history is very weak in Indian mind. They are trying to live in the eternal always, you see. Trying to live in the eternal. So, who wrote, where he lived, how, nobody cares. bothers about it. Kalidas, who happened even in classical time, nobody knows where he lived, what was. You can always make a thesis and feel, but it's a hypothesis. They don't care. They don't mind. That was a defect in one sense, historically, because you can't make precise anything. You can't look at the author, you can't know his life, where he was, which city, nothing. His works are raised to the heaven and they hold it up like that. Kalidas, oh wonderful, they will say. But where was he Kalidas? Nobody knows. They will say Ujjain, another says Kashmir, third says Calcutta. Now who is right? The Bengali think he must be a Bengali. Because Kali Das, and Kali is worshipped in Bengal now. See, Kali must have come some centuries after Kalidas. We don't know, but the Bengalis pull it that way and they say he was near Calcutta. The Rajputana people say he speaks of Ujjain and Ujjain is in Rajputana, so he must have been Rajputana. But he speaks of Kashmir in one of his Meghduta, the cloud messenger. So they say he was a Kashmiri. How can it be? Now Kashmir, Rajputana and Calcutta. See, one is in the east, one is in the center, third is in the north, and divided by at least 500 to 700 miles.
Is there a record of the material that the book was written upon?
Nothing. Only the book is there. There was no printing press at that time, most probably. So what they used to do was employ one man, and he goes on writing, 50 copies, 100 copies, and then a king or a rich man, when he wants to be very generous or charitable, he distributes to literary persons or schools or colleges or the seminars, and they have a copy. They copy again from there. That's
that's the way it grew.
Yeah. So nobody
memorize a lot of things.
Yes, that is tremendous. Idea what they can memorize. You go to Kashi and you'll be staggered.
Yeah.
From one end to the other and back from this to other end.
Yes.
Terrific. Gita hundreds in India remember by heart. They memorize and first verse they go on repeating.
When we were in India, Granny, this little girl, I think she was just 13, 12 or 13, she knows the whole Gita by heart.
Yes.
And I find I tried it. It's sort of thing is very difficult to memorize.
No, but when you like it, you see.
Yes.
When you come to like, you go on doing it.
That's what she was doing, and she did that.
Go. You want to shoot somebody here?
I got in India, and she likes to see it incense. I think incense.
Could you give us some lines that are inspiring from the Gita in English? Not sense.
Well, we'll get it tomorrow.
It's all theoretical now. It doesn't mean anything except that just an outline and so is such and so on.
Well, it relates life and God and makes life a field for reaching God, which is a very great thing, I think. There is a first scripture in the world for the matter of that. That is based on a life situation. And points out that in life these questions do arise and you can get a reply from your inner self and you can make it as a step to reach the divine. Now that is rather practical than theoretical, I think. Gita doesn't philosophize at all. Gita simply says, oh, you are in a battlefield, don't think that the battlefield is yours. God can act in the battlefield. That's how it will speak if you ask the writer of the Gita. He said, I'm not telling you any philosophy at all. You want to practice, you want to think that this is your battlefield, that is your mistake. There is a divine purpose to be carried out in the battlefield. You find out that and carry it out. And it's a very great message because it pertains to life. It shows how to come to a decision when two things are, at variance. One duty and another aspect of the same duty coming to you. See, your duty towards family and duty towards country, or a moral value and actual conditions prevailing in your own individual life. How to choose. Then one has to understand Vivekananda's situation. He was the only man who could have supported his family. His mother was a widow and he had a brother to support. Now, whether he should take sannyas or practice as an advocate, it's a practical question. Gita comes to her help and says, you decide by an inner voice. No family, nothing, no social life, no morality. That's it. If Vivekananda had chosen, you would have no Vivekananda. Gautam Buddha was inheritor of a small principality and he was husband of a wife and father of a child. Now has he a duty to owe which he owes to his father, one, to his wife and to his child and to his state, second and third, or to this call how to cure man's suffering? To decide, you see. Gita gives you the guidance to show how to act. This is a very great thing. Because this happens in many people's case. And people always compromise and say, no, no, great things are good to think of, but not to follow. That's what they say always. You must have very good thing. It is good to think like that, but we must not do. Somebody else must jump into the fire. See? If you want to go to heaven, it's oneself must die. That's the rule. It is not somebody else dies and we go to heaven. That's not possible yet. This value has to be practiced by the individual. That is what Gita insists, and that's a very great lesson. Gives you view that the world is divine. No other scripture gives in that, picturesque way in which Gita gives you the experience of how to practice the presence of the divine in life.
Ronnie, I have some little inexpensive copies of the Gita in there, and the issue with Prabhavananda translation. It isn't my favorite translation, but it's a little paperback book, a little inexpensive one if anybody wants to look at it.
I would recommend Anil Baran's and Essays on the Gita if you want really to understand.
Oh, to understand, but Ida was asking for some lines from the Gita, and they're in there.
Oh, Gita has various inspired passages. The whole of the 11th chapter is inspired. Whole of the 11th chapter is inspired.
Didn't he ask to see the Creator? And he did see the Creator. And I read it one morning sitting in the sunshine. And I thought, my goodness, if I were to see atoms, that's what I'd see. This lots of flaming, rhythmic movement, so tremendous.
The 11th chapter describes the cosmic being as destroyer. Cosmic in its destructive aspect. And it is that which is speaking in the Gita, you see. So he says, I am time, the destroyer of the peoples. Like that it begins. And it's not you who will kill, but I have already killed these people. It's very inspired. It is one of the most inspired passages in the world's literature. Now, the Essays on the Gita is very inspired. Sri Aurobindo's writing. The Essays on the Gita which you have, the last chapter, the message of the Gita. It is like the 11th chapter. It's very high. It is for the modern man the inspiration. Yes. The same inspiration coming through Sri Aurobindo. Wonderful it is. It is a marvelous chapter. Last, message of the Gita. It is Sri Aurobindo's writing, only he is summarizing the whole thing. But represents marvelously. It is marvelous. Message of the Gita. It's a wonderful message. You need not read the whole Gita if you read that. It is so all-inclusive.
Last chapter?
Last chapter of the Essays on the Gita.
Oh.
That as you have seen me, many great seers even have not seen me. It is very difficult to see me. And it's not because you deserve that you see me, but I want you to see me. That's why I'm showing you. That's how he says. The cosmic destructive aspect is telling him many seers want to see me, but they are not able to see me. And I am not coming to you because you deserve, but I want to reveal myself to you and make you understand what is being done here in this battlefield. Therefore, I have come to reveal my form to you. And then Arjuna says that I can't bear you, therefore please become what you were before, with normal human body and the beauty of the human form and so on. This is too terrific for me, I can't stand it very long. So he takes his human form and again he says, oh, excuse me, I was thinking you are a human being, that you are son of Vasudeva and they are to relate it to me like my brother-in-law and so on and so on. All that was my mistake and I have cut jokes with you and I have thought you to be a human being. All that you must excuse me. When he comes to the human form, Arjuna begs pardon for all his treatment of him as a human being.
I heard someone went all the way to India to see Sri Aurobindo, and they found out they couldn't see him except for a few minutes, on the day of darshan. And they said, well, what makes you? He said, only a few minutes after coming all this way. And they said, well, what makes you think you could stand to be in his presence for more than 3 minutes? Let's remember that.
Spiegelberg.
Yeah.
Was it Spielberg?
Yeah.
Spiegelberg told that on himself
Yeah.
one time when he was in San Francisco learning.
Unforgettable 29th of February, he said.
Yeah.
The unforgettable date. He didn't refer all the detail, but he told them that. Yes, he was attended one of the light event classes which I took there.
Oh, did he? Spielberg. Oh.
Movement of nature,
Movement of nature.
thought movement, vital movement, suggestions, thoughts. All that flows and acts is Prakriti, and that which detaches and watches is Purusha.
Integrates besides karma, bhakti, and hatha, sankhya too.
Sankhya and Raj Yoga also, partly Raj Yoga. Sankhya, yes, Sankhya is a system of philosophy in which Purusha and Prakriti are regarded as two eternally separate elements. Vedanta puts them together and makes them one. Purusha is not regarded as separate from Prakriti, but the originator of all the energy that Prakriti has. So that the two become one. One is the static aspect, another is the dynamic aspect of the same reality. There is no opposition between the two, according to the Vedantic school.
This morning, wondering if anyone had ever drawn up or composed a chart of the sequences that have developed in cycles of man's processes as through a, what we could call a beginning of his awareness into the realm that he stands now, into the frequencies of Buddhism and this other work that we're bringing out, describing to us. I wonder if anyone has ever charted this and brought the variations in. Anyone at the ashram?
I don't quite yet catch your question. What is it?
You mean put it into a chart?
Put it into a chart as man awareness comes in. In other words, there was a cycle of knowledge given through Buddhism, something given through the Gita, and something given through all of it. How can man's knowledge be charted in these various realms of knowledge that have been given? In other words, how much has he gained by it, and when did they come into their sequence?
The whole point is that now the present generation stands on all that.
Stands calm, yes.
Yes. So
I mean, there must have been a rise and a deep.
So what has been done has been already either accepted or assimilated into the condition in which man stands today. It's not as if Buddhism, of course, to some people to whom Buddhism is a traditional religion and so on, it is standing even now there and they are trying to make something out of it. But what they can take out of it is what we have decided and discussed. What they can take out of it is only the attitude of controlling nature by ethical values and rising to a static condition in which action of consciousness stops. That's as far as they will go, whatever they may do. You want to follow what I say? Yes, yes. So that's all. If they, but now a synthesis which Arunda brings it to being, you get all that has been done is there already. You are adding many elements more than what was done before. There was no conception of a real idea or a truth consciousness. For instance, there was no idea of a capacity of man's consciousness to ascend to a higher consciousness and then bring down something of the higher consciousness into his nature part. So many new elements have been already added on that basis of control, ethical values, separation of self, and actionlessness inside or impersonality inside, and activity outside. All those elements have been assimilated. They are there. The present synthesis leaves nothing of the past attainment behind. You want to follow what?
I realize that.
Yeah, that's it.
The other thing
So the point is that, well, for those who are interested in the history of the past, they can go back and try to find out. But otherwise, as the whole thing is present, we don't bother about taking an intellectual point of view and
the only thing, as a presentation to an active mind, you could visually see that this procedure has taken place and the cycle has extended.
Yes.
The population is so great at this time, and the population is so great here, and in that proportion, this other knowledge was given in, you see, and manifested to a greater awareness here.
Yes, that is true.
It would be good to, as a presentation point, to create a higher thinking mind.
You mean like some of the Purani's schemas?
Yes, in other words, just
picture of it. In picture form.
Yeah, in picture form, there's or graphic illustration.
I do it only to help understanding, that's all.